Detroit city government is a service institution that recognizes its subordination to the people of Detroit. The city shall provide for the public peace, health, and safety of persons and property within its jurisdictional limits. The people have a right to expect aggressive action by the city's officers in seeking to advance, conserve, maintain, and protect the integrity of the human, physical, and natural resources of the city from encroachment and or dismantlement. The people have a right to expect city government to provide for its residents decent housing, job opportunities, reliable, convenient, and comfortable transportation, recreational facilities and activities, cultural enrichment, including libraries, art and historical museums, clean air and waterways, safe drinking water, and a sanitary, environmentally sound city. Keep it locked. The Black Detroit Democracy Podcast starts right after these messages.
Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The MASH Detroit Small Business Hub is a 6,000 square feet space available for members, residents, and businesses and organizations. To learn more about rental options at MASH Detroit, contact Nicole Perry at nperry@ecn-detroit.org or 313-331-3485.
Detroit Democracy Podcast. Every week, we open this podcast with a reading of the preamble to the Detroit City Charter, read by the one and only Bryce Detroit. The City Charter is our constitution, which defines our rights and the way government should work. I'm Donna Givens-Davidson, President and CEO of the Eastside Community Network.
And I'm Sam Robinson, founder of Detroit 1 Million.
Thank you for listening in and supporting this expanded effort to build another platform of authentic voices of real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. The purpose of this podcast is to encourage Detroit citizens to stay vigilant in the fight for justice and equality, with a special call to action for Black Detroit. We seek to build awareness of our history as a gateway to freedom, a beacon for justice, and a laboratory of liberation. Welcome back to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. Well, it's time for Word on the Street, where we break down what everyone's been saying behind the scenes. Sam, there's a lot, but what have you heard?
There is a lot. I was at a packed city council yesterday for not just, one of the last council sessions before we see sort of a remaking of Detroit City Council is going to add in District 5. Renata Miller is going to replace Mary Sheffield, and in District 7, Denzel McCampbell is going to replace Fred Durhall. Things got heated over this dirt demolition contractor scandal. I guess you would call it a scandal. I talked to subcontractors, minority certified businesses with the city of Detroit, who tell me they're having a hard time paying. Some of them are having a hard time paying their employees because this guy, Brian McKinney, the owner of Guyanga Company, this is a demolition company that is closely championed by the city of Detroit in the last several years.
And let's be clear, by the mayor of the city of Detroit.
Through social media, shout-outs on stage and during speeches.
He became the poster child for demolition in Detroit when people were concerned about demolition program in the city of Detroit not employing Black folks. Brian McKinney was positioned as the savior, and he got a lot of the contracts. I think I read something like $57 million worth of business with the city of Detroit.
Yeah, I think $68 million.
$68 million.
And he did it all without his company being bonded.
Right. So let's talk about the process for a demolition company in the city of Detroit, because there is a process. You can't go to, first of all, you just can't show up and bid. The city has a demolition board or an entity that approves demolition contractors. And those approved demolition contractors, the city solicits bids from demolition contractors. The city of Detroit, under Mayor Duggan's leadership, and right now we do have a Department of Demolition, reviews the bids, selects the entities, prepares a contract that is then sent to City Council for approval. So the lion's share of the work is done by the mayor's office. They are the ones who select all of the contractors. City Council has the sole authority to approve and perhaps investigate if they have questions. And so we can acknowledge that the majority of Guyonga's contracts were approved by a unanimous vote. There were, I think, early on in 2019, about 50 contracts that 2 city council people voted no, and for Guyonga. And that is former council president Brenda Jones and then Mary Sheffield. 7 other city council persons approved those contracts every single time. So as we discuss this should rest at the feet of the mayor of Detroit, not the mayor-elect, who has been centered in this controversy because it's salacious.
Sure.
And there was a relationship between her and this contractor. But this whole process of him becoming a contractor started long before that relationship. It was not based on that relationship. And I think it's important that we set the record straight on that.
Mary Sheffield went to the City of Detroit Ethics Board. There's a lot of scrutiny around whether or not, that can be, without conflict, approving. And I think, as Donna, you correctly summarize, I think there are more factors that play than what is being framed. I think it's fair to ask the question and I think the answers to this point have been appropriate. There's a lot of questions still that will be asked. I think the people that are going to lead the fight in asking those questions, you saw Charlie LaDuff actually give public comment, sort of defending some of these subcontractors who, are the real victims of this.
I didn't see Charlie LaDuff's statements, and I think the question.
Yes, he was there, saying, there needs to be justice on behalf of these folks that have been stiffed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
There absolutely does need to be justice on behalf of those folks who've been stiffed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there has to be an improved process to ensure that all contractors who are doing that level of city business are bonded. And it seems as though there's a violation on part of contracting to not ensure they're bonded. I cannot imagine this passing legal scrutiny without the law department saying, wait a minute, is this person bonded? Some things slip through the cracks and we need to figure out who did what wrong. But I think we're focusing on the wrong aspects of it because it is salacious, because it does involve the mayor-elect. And we're not really looking at the process for contractor selection, which again is something that the mayoral administration oversees.
Yeah.
And now I would imagine the inspector general is going to go back and make some recommendations to city council about things that they can do to tighten up the scrutiny of contracts before they're approved, questions they should ask. And, but when those contracts come before city council, the city of Detroit is recommending their passage. It's not a neutral process where they're saying, what do you think? Do you think we should select this person or not? The city of Detroit brings contracts forward that they would like to have passed. City council has the responsibility for reviewing, scrutinizing, and approving them. And I think it's safe to say there was a breakdown on some level. And certainly the city of Detroit under Mayor Duggan bears a large responsibility for that. You can't make that your poster child for demolition and then go hide when things go wrong.
And that is exactly what Michael Leavitt, he is the attorney for several of these subcontractors, vendors, told me yesterday. The ethics, we're going back to the sort of background story, which, didn't really come up in the framework other than her vocal critics, loudly showing up to council and being escorted out by security, or Charlie, sort of smugly suggesting it in his comments. But the board told her to exercise caution, to remain independent. She says that's what she did and lets the record speak for itself. I think that there will be, I do think the story is on the subcontractors, on the vendors, and I want to keep it there, because there are folks that are struggling to pay their employees. There are folks that are out of work having to stand in food bank lines because of Brian McKinney's negligence.
There's two stories.
Yeah.
One of the stories is on the contracting process, and it's got to be improved. The other story is on the failure, the impact of the failure to ensure he was bonded on these contractors who now are stiffed. And I'm sure there will be lawsuits, and I'm sure through those lawsuits they'll try to recoup some money. Out of $68 million, we don't know how much is left. We know also through yesterday there was also work that Guyanga was doing for DWSD.
Yeah.
And that's a whole separate approval process. Different people are in charge of that. It's a bad look, and possibly we don't know what it's going to amount to, but I would imagine he's not going to do business in the city of Detroit moving forward.
No, and, of course, everyone is there, sort of waiting to see how council would react to Guyanga attorneys defending Brian McKinney, accusing the city's inspector general of racism, frankly. Nobody really came to his defense. We did hear one comment suggestion that sort of riled up the subcontractors and vendors from Angela Whitfield Calloway that sort of...
City council member Angela Whitfield Calloway.
She, in speaking to trying to pay the vendors, the subcontractors, suggested the city pay McKinney. Of course, the subcontractors, vendors sitting there, understanding that McKinney has already stiffed them, however many months it's been. They don't believe that if he got paid that they would get any of that money.
I mean, according to the city, and maybe I've read this incorrectly, he's already been paid for the work he's done. That's not been suspended. What's been suspended has been future work. And so I think that, we'll just hope that she was ill-informed when she made that suggestion, and she did not, fact check to ensure that this was not a matter of we're not going to pay you for work you performed. This is a matter if you cannot perform any work on behalf of the city, either you, Brian McKinney, individually, or Guyanga, your corporate entity, during this period of debarment. Now, it could be permanent. It could be, for the next 20 years. I don't know. But I think the violation of human rights, and I think when you don't pay people, that's a violation of human rights,
yes,
won't sell well. So even if the debarment is over, I cannot imagine these contracts getting approved. And I think that we've learned something about mass demolitions, because there's the other aspect of mass demolitions that came out, and that is that when you are digging big holes in the ground quickly, getting enough backfill that's clean and sanitized and been checked to make sure it's not polluted is really hard.
And it's expensive.
There's a whole industry of selling polluted backfill. It's a hidden industry where people are making millions and millions of dollars selling this stuff. And there's stories that have been, there's, analysis that have gone back years to point out that a lot of lots are being backfilled without unapproved sources of backfill. So this is not restricted to this one contractor. I think the problem is that when you want to cry racism over being suspended for poisoning the soil of places where Black people live, and assert that you have the privilege of doing so and you don't have a responsibility to make sure that soil is not contaminated, it's just not going to sell very well. Another interesting part of that story, though, is that the Perkins Law Firm was involved in this, in defending him and actually representing him at City Council, because we know that Todd Perkins, who was not the attorney of record at the hearing, was
his partner.
Is his partner. I guess he must be the majority
Adam
partner
Clemens,
because his name is on the building, or on the firm. But we know that he just ran against Mayor-elect Sheffield for the mayoral race and lost in the primaries. But
yeah, it was interesting sitting in that room. Of course, the sort of ironic twist part of the story. Now they're using racism as a tool. They were the only demolition company that was certified as a Detroit resident business 6 or 7 years ago, when there was a ton of attention on that issue the idea that these construction companies were not hiring Detroiters. When you think about these companies being stiffed by Brian McKinney, that's who it's harming, are these Detroit workers who he claimed to be the champion of.
And one of them, got fired for a whistleblowing complaint.
Yes.
And according to your reporting, said that she had been threatened with a gun by Brian McKinney in the process.
Said she had witnessed him threaten, others, several individuals. She said she has the video. I'm still waiting to see that video.
Right.
This woman named Carla Osborne says that, she at first feared speaking out, but felt like it was her duty, as she felt like it was her duty to report McKinney's company when she worked there last year. She was fired on her birthday, she tells me, and, was threatened. And, she's fearful that she's going to be able to continue to get work in the industry that she, has invested time and money to get certification to do. And so it was it was an emotional story. She accosted a man walking out of the council chamber, had to get escorted out by security as she's yelling at this man who she tells me is being bribed, more or less, to defend McKinney's company. It's a sad case. It's a sad story. It was a sad day at City Council.
So I think this is a story we should follow.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in contracting and how we make sure that we are doing the right things. I'm interested in the findings from the Inspector General. I actually know Kamal Marable, believe that he has a lot of integrity. And again, this is a black man who's being accused of racism. And so that gets really interesting, or racial bias, a black resident of Detroit who is leading this department. And so I think it's always a good idea to, assume that public officials are trying to do their jobs well, unless you have evidence otherwise. But let's follow the story. Let's follow up and find out what happened to these contractors, whether they got paid. I'm not certain that the city has the ability to pay them directly, so it may end up being a lawsuit. And I don't know who would be sued, because I don't know if the city is exposed because he was not bonded. And that's for the lawyers to figure out. But I think we should be looking at this case as an example and keep the focus where it should be, on contracting processes, making sure that they're appropriate, making sure that we've done the correct screening and we have all the documentation. And also whistleblowing, like why was he allowed to amass hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt without some kind of consequence, and going to the city saying, listen, is there a way for, and I'm not even thinking of blowers. I just think of the Office of Civil Rights. I think of all of these different opportunities for compliance to make sure that whoever the contractor is working in the city of Detroit is actually, not violating people's rights.
Yeah, I agree. I think the government ethics component to the story is one that is also fair to scrutinize. When asked, this is not related to this, but when asked about the concert ticket drama, that was a story during the election, Mayor-elect Sheffield said she would like to see our ethics systems improved and strengthened.
Yeah, they should be improved and strengthened. I think you should have clear advice. And I also think that we should have some level of litmus test about things that we are concerned about as a city. And I'm not trying to, whoever the mayor is, even if it's a mayor who I don't like. If, for example, somebody gave Mayor Duggan 6 concert tickets to see Kid Rock, I wouldn't care. I don't think that that's a material gift. And that's just me. If I allow you to come sit in my suite, I think that's, we have to have a certain level of scrutiny where we say that some things are more significant than others. Will a mayor be invited to places where there are valuable things being done or offered? Absolutely. They get invited to dinners. They get invited to all different types of corporate events. And I don't know that any kind of ethics committee is going to change that. Maybe they should, but I'm just saying that we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars in perhaps misuse funds going to contractors. And that should be where our focus is when we talk about ethics, and not on trying to play gotcha games with public officials who are, treated like, VIPs in our city for a reason. And again, I don't know that you're going to take away the VIP status. We have events, and I'll give an example. We have an event where people pay, $150 for a ticket to come to the Eastside Extravaganza. And we've had city council members, not the mayor-elect, city council members show up and expect to be fed, expect to sit down. And, you can say, well, is that fair? And I'm not talking about our city council person, Letitia Johnson, who always purchases a table and, contributes. But there have been city council people who've shown up. There have been other elected officials who have shown up at events and expected to be able to partake in whatever it is they were offering without paying money. And that's a thing. I mean, it's just a thing.
Yeah, it is. And yeah.
And you have to accommodate them. I go to places and people say, who are all the elected officials in the room? And they're there. Yeah. And I don't know that 100% of those people are paying tickets. I don't know if it's a good use of our time to find out if they are. I'm concerned about contracting. I'm concerned about relationships that have a material impact on a decision, even if there was an ethical complaint. And, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but if you have 9 city council people and one person has a relationship with somebody else and they give a yes vote, if they voted no, or they disclose they have a relationship, that would not necessarily sway the 8 other votes. So, it's not as though there was a real opportunity for independent input, unless there's evidence that this city council person who had that relationship was working behind the scenes to sway other people to vote for these contracts. And there's no evidence of that. And so
no, we don't have, I mean, we have more evidence that would suggest that, like these subcontractors, like, many of the people that I've talked to about Brian McKinney, perhaps Sheffield, who is, no longer and has not been for several years, in a relationship with this person, perhaps she has also been swindled and conned by the person.
Well, I mean, good people tend to treat people well. And people who defraud people and do other things don't tend to treat people well. I mean, there's also the possibility, I don't know if anybody else has ever been in a breakup or dated somebody and they have bad feelings, but those are not necessarily people you're going to vote in favor of in the future anyway. So this suggestion that because I dated you a few times or for a little while, that you are forever on my good list, well, if you're me.
Reality would suggest the opposite.
Not true. There are people who stay friends with people that used to, but some of us, especially when they're not necessarily great to us, we don't necessarily want to take care of them anymore. And so there's this silliness, and I think people are just grasping for something, and it is salacious, and it's a woman. And so there's always going to be this scrutiny about her personal life. I appreciate you putting the focus where it belongs, and that is on the workers, it is on the contractors, it is on the people who have been harmed by the polluted soil, and it is the responsibility of the person who did all of this, Brian McKinney, is the person who we should be really focused on holding accountable, even as we try to tighten up our contracting processes.
Yeah. I want to talk about something that I'm excited about.
We'll do that in a minute. We're going to take a short break.
Yes.
And then we'll come back and we're going to talk about
the WNBA Detroit basketball experience is coming 2029.
All right. We'll be right back.
Detroit 1 Million is a journalism project started by Sam Robinson that centers a generation of Michiganders growing up in a state without a city with 1 million people. Support the only independent reporter covering the 2025 Detroit mayoral race through the lens of young people. Good journalism costs. Visit Detroit1million.com to support Black independent reporting.
And we're back to talk about the WNBA. I have to say, as a woman, it is so exciting to see the WNBA getting the kind of visibility and interest that it is now getting. So talk.
Yes. Detroit's WNBA team Still unsure whether they're going to be able to call themselves the Detroit Shock. My research this morning uncovered that the Detroit Shock actually currently exists. A league called the Women's Basketball League currently owns the naming rights to the Detroit Shock. They use the Shock name on their jersey. Not clear to me how many teams are in this semi-professional league. The owner of the league also owns the naming rights to the Cleveland former women's basketball team. So it appears more like a front to just, sort of hold hostage these names until the teams come back. They are coming back. There's a team coming back to Cleveland, much like Detroit, WNBA. Shock, the Detroit Shock won 3 championships. They won them with Bill Laimbeer, former Bad Boy Piston, as the head coach. And then they moved once Bill Davidson died. He's the former owner of the Detroit Pistons. You will see William Davidson. You'll see his name on the park with the new basketball complex at the Ralph Wilson Park down there at the riverfront. It's very nice. Go check it out if you have not yet. I know it's getting cold, but it's still nice. It's covered. And so it's 2 full-size NBA courts. But his wife moved the team to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That team moved to Dallas. They're now the Dallas Wings. And so a lot of people are wondering, on top of the team name, are they going to be able to get the history back? Like, are we going to be able to say, yes, we were the Detroit Shock? We still don't know because, in sports, how pro sports works are like franchises will hold hostage the history of a team. Say the Oklahoma City Thunder operate as if the Seattle Supersonics, they still cherish that history within the Oklahoma City building. But the Seattle fans hate that they do that. And if a Seattle team comes back to the NBA, they are certainly going to have, a big rivalry with that franchise.
Yeah, there's a number of teams that have historically moved from one place to the other. Yeah. And the team history goes where the team goes, not where where they started. There's not geographic. I almost think it would be a good idea to come up with a new name, an exciting name, something that, back when the Shock was with the WNBA, first of all, television rights weren't that great. So you're not watching it on TV. Right. You still don't see the WNBA on the, mainstream channels in the same way that you do the NBA. But we're talking about a period of time where the WNBA just was not respected. Women's sports were not as respected. I mean, maybe tennis. We're seeing women's sports actually getting more visibility, and there, all the rivalries with Caitlin and Angel actually have helped elevate the visibility because people watch; they can attack the other person. Right. But I'm excited about it. When my daughters were in high school at Renaissance, I knew a number of the women's basketball players and the boys and girls teams. Mm-hmm. And I went to a lot of the girls teams. But I watched that at a high school level, not at a professional level. Yeah. And a lot of those young ladies were really, really good and had nowhere to go. And so this expansion of the WNBA is significant for young women athletes.
It really is. I mean, even today, you think about the current iteration of the WNBA is, it might even be 12 teams. I got to look it up. How many WNBA teams? It's not very many teams. It's a condensed season. I think they play, around like 25 to 35 games in a regular season. The financing of the practice facility, they will not build a new arena for this. They will split time between the LCA and the Wayne State new facility where the Motor City Cruise NBA G League team plays. But they are going to get their own practice facility, and in a separate phase of that development, we will see a youth sports academy is what it is being billed as, this youth sports complex facility, whatever you want to call it. When you talk about youth sports academy, there's a lot of, it could go any sort of direction with that. Because when I think of sports academy, I'm thinking of some prep school in Florida that costs $100,000 for rich people in New York and California to send their kids to try to become pro athletes. And I don't know if that's
You know,
the goal of what they're trying to cook up there.
I don't think that's it. You know, I have to be
No.
honest. I'm a track mom. So my oldest and youngest ran track through high school. And all three of my children ran track at one point, but the oldest and youngest stayed with it the longest. And we used to travel a lot to track meets because people don't necessarily know that track is an all-year sport. You have indoor track that starts in November or December, practicing. Then you have school track, which follows when you're in high school. Then you have your outdoor season, which is where you're competing against people in different locations, and that's your club track. And then you go back to your indoor track. And so there were places that we would travel to for indoor tracks. Mm-hmm. These are places that have 400-meter tracks. And there's a place in Ohio, I'm trying to remember the name of the place in Ohio, which was amazing. Mm-hmm. They had dance rooms there. They had basketball courts, tennis courts, and it was this bringing together all of these youth sports. And I kept thinking Detroit needs something like this. It would be such a good way to make money because you have people traveling from all over to go to Prince George's County at their Nike track facility, again, which was a full sports facility. And I think that's what they're looking at doing here, which is something I've been wanting to see happen for so long. It makes a whole lot of economic sense for us to invest in youth sports. When my kids ran track during the indoor season, there was no place in the city of Detroit for them to practice. So they had to go to either Ypsilanti at Eastern University or the University of Michigan track in order to practice. Think about this. I'm working full time. I've got 3 children, and I'm driving to Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti 2 or 3 times a week. And then the meets are all-day meets. So there's a lot of economic opportunity for that. I'm hoping that's what they intend to do. It's something that many people think they should do. The question is, and I think this is the big question, 1, who's going to operate it? 2, have they raised the money? And 3, why isn't this included in the community benefits or in the plan that City Council was asked to approve? Because they broke it into 2 different phases, and phases 1 is what I believe was approved. And that phase 1 cost is going to be below the $75 million threshold for a community benefits plan.
Yeah. $75 million is the requirement. That's the amount, if projects go over, then, it needs to have a community input process involving the impacted residents nearby. Malachi Barrett of Bridge Detroit, who has probably been the leading CBO reporter over the last several years himself, J.C. Riedel as well, the Detroit Free Press, pressed Richard Haddad. He is the leader of Detroit Sports and Entertainment. They are a group working with W Detroit, that is the developer behind this project. They say that it's 2 separate projects. The WNBA practice facility and the youth academy are going to be developed in 2 separate phases. They're asking for a brownfield tax increment financing package that, of course, needs legislative approval for $34.5 million for prep costs. And Detroiters for Tax Justice, they say that they're skirting the CBO agreements by doing it this way. They say that the development is all in the same. The developer's own brownfield proposal references this as one development. So it is, interesting that they are doing it this way. It is very clear and obvious to advocates and to people that have been following the CBO process that companies, these developers oftentimes find this process highly annoying and they do not like participating in it.
This is a community benefits process I would get to participate in because it's so close to where I live. So I'm happy it's happening, but I'm interested. What is the status of this project right now?
Well, they want the team to come by 2029. They're going to need state approval through the Michigan Strategic Fund. They're doing this brownfield TIF plan that we've seen be used for the Hudson's building or District Detroit, but they're splitting the project into two separate
and city council.
components.
I think the point is the city council approved it.
Yes, they approved it. Yeah, unanimously. We heard from a number of community voices.
In full disclosure, I gave a letter of support to this project.
Okay, sure.
I don't know when I gave the letter of support that I understood that there would be two separate, proposals submitted. But I did submit a letter of support because I believe that it makes sense for that land to be redeveloped.
Yeah, and especially you talk about, we're talking about contaminated dirt.
Mm-hmm.
The Uniroyal site,
Yeah.
they're getting a reimbursement, the $34.5 million that they're requesting through the TIF brownfield tool. That would, they say, do the what is the actual language? Let me not butcher what they actually. It's for site remediation and preparation, but there's something with the dirt because it is the former Uniroyal site that requires an intensive cleanup process. And they explained it yesterday at the city council session. You can go back and listen to their explanation. I am not I'm not a mover of dirt. I'm not Brian McKinney, so I can't explain contaminated dirt.
Well, we should have a whole discussion on that because it is a component of environmental justice that is under, it's not discussed as much. I researched demolitions in my class and I learned about the backfill economy, and it was really fascinating to me and really disturbing at the same time in that research. But it's not publicly discussed often enough that when you have that many demolitions, you have those issues. And then when you have a project site like the Uniroyal site, it's allowed to sit in a contaminated state for, ever until you have somebody coming in to invest in that. It's the investment that attracts the cleanup dollars. The challenge I have with that is that when you have contamination like that, especially that close to the Detroit River, I wonder about seepage of that contamination into the river, and are we impacting our groundwater? Should we be more proactive at cleaning up sites we know are heavily contaminated, even when we know it's going to be, hundreds of millions of dollars? I do want to make a correction real quickly.
Yeah.
When I talked about the place in Ohio, it's the Spire Academy.
Spire. Okay, so
and
that's
I
an
did find
example.
out they are a boarding school. And I didn't realize, I think when I first went there, they weren't a boarding school, and now they are. So yeah, that is an example of a boarding school that also offers these benefits to people outside. I'm hoping that it's not a boarding school because, I have my own thoughts around taking children out of high school and putting them in these settings where all they do is focus on is sports. I don't, and a lot of times the academics are not what they should be.
No. Cade Cunningham went to a similar style of prep school when he was 15 years old. And so he, as a high school sophomore, left high school and moved from Texas to Florida.
Yeah.
It's called Mount Verde.
Right.
Seems like a well-adjusted young man. He did that. You can go watch his interview with Kevin Durant. It was really interesting. Finally, we're hearing him talk about the impact that having a daughter at 16 years old had on him. He told Kevin that he thought that his basketball career was over. It was because of his parents' support telling him, no, Cade, we got Riley, we have you, go pursue your dreams, that he was able to actually do that.
Right.
And it was just this, really we've never seen Cade that vulnerable before, talking to other basketball players.
Well,
in that
that's
setting.
wonderful.
We'll probably do that.
And I'm glad he got what he needed. And I'm sure some of the schools do a really good job. There are some that do not.
I think I
And
agree with the latter part of it.
Yes, and I think that it's not well regulated.
No.
And I hate seeing young people exploit it when we know that. And I'd like to see some data. Like what percentage of kids graduating from these
Are actually going to pro
academies
sports leagues.
are going to college sports leagues, right? How many of them, is this a guarantee? How many of them actually, because, the percentage of kids who perform in high school, play sports in high school, and go on to college is low. And then the percentage of those, especially in basketball, who go from college to the NBA or the NFL is extremely low. And so we can put all of our eggs in this basket, but the basket is not likely to deliver for most people. And that's where I think the justice concerns come in. And the other question is, if you aren't going to be able to do that, if it's a really good school, then maybe you have the educational background where you can do something else. Your plan B works. But in some schools, I believe you're getting online education without a lot of rigor and a lot of, monitoring and support. And so the concern is that this kid has been trained and immersed in basketball and is not really equipped to do a whole lot of other things.
I also just wonder the connection to the community in which these kids are living in away from home. I do wonder that. Like, I'm not sure what city Mount Verde is or whatever, Spire Academy, but I really wonder, young kids being sort of taken away from home and living in a place that they're not familiar with. It's interesting to think about. Donna, you had the most interesting point of all of this today, saying, and this is a unique, you're going to stand on an island when you said that you want the Shock to come with a new name. So all the fans want the old name back. Everyone wants the old name because they think about the championships and their favorite player or whatever. But I think that's an interesting perspective, and I think that is one that we will hear more of.
And admittedly, I'm not a fan of the Shock. I will be a fan of this new team.
Okay.
I'll even go to some games, right?
Sure, yeah.
I'm excited about it. And I regret not having supported them. I think that more of us need to be accountable for supporting women in all of our endeavors, right? I just think sometimes, there's excitement around something new.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe you can just add something to the Shock. But I think that and keep the Shock inside the name. I don't know if you can't use any portion of the name. But, I respect fans. And so if the fans want something different and the fans want to hold on to the old name, I would not be opposed to it. I just think from an outside standpoint, giving it something new could make it more exciting. But you're right. There are championships that go along with that. There's players and there's history that goes along with that. And so there would be a loss for some people in this community.
Yeah. So someone told me on Twitter, don't mess with a winning brand. Everyone, it seems like, and I use that on my Twitter. Literally everyone that I've talked to is like, well, bring the Shock back. If it's not the Shock, who cares? Like literally, they're like so hung on the Shock being the name. And I hate to disappoint everybody, but based on the conversation that I just had yesterday, doesn't look like it's probably going to be the Shock.
Well, if I'm on an island, I hope I get a ferry right back to the mainland.
Well, I will tell you that I asked Haddad directly, does an individual currently own the rights to the Shock name? He did not answer the question. We understand that the Detroit Shock name is not currently owned by the NBA. He told me, I will just say that that's one of the options that we're looking at, but there's a multitude of options, and we're not far enough along in the naming process. I'm reading through the tea leaves. I just do not think that they're going to spend the money that the man who owns the Shock name, his name is Ryan Reed. So perhaps the public should start pressuring Ryan Reed to sell the name to the WNBA. He said that they've had cordial conversations. He told the Detroit Free Press earlier this year.
I mean, if he has it, if there's no basketball team that's truly functioning under that, or he's not making money on that, then it doesn't necessarily make sense for him to keep it.
It does not.
But he may have acquired that with the intent of selling it, or he may have acquired that and now realize there's an opportunity. As with anything, when there's great demand and the more the public clamors for that name, it also makes it more difficult to get it. Because if he believes that you don't need, that people will not support the basketball without the Shock, then he can charge any amount of money for it. So I think that's the other thing, is don't let them hold you hostage. We're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the DTE rate hikes.
Yes.
And, the data centers in Michigan.
We're going to talk about all kinds of DTE drama.
Yes. So be right back.
Have you ever dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network is here to make those dreams come true. Formerly known as the Deep Network and located inside the Stoudemire, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your idea off of the ground. Just visit authenticallydet.com and send a request through the contact page.
Let's talk about DTE rate hikes. Do you think you're paying enough for your energy bills?
No, I think they should be higher.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, that's what DTE tells us.
Can you ever pay enough? They said
they're going to make it more reliable.
One of their things that they want to raise the rates so they can invest in things to keep the rates low. And I got so confused by the end of that sentence. I was like, so you're going to keep rates low by making them high. Okay. There is, as you know, a petition drive, which is Mop Up Michigan, Money Out of Politics Michigan. And I believe one of the Senate candidates, Abdul El Sayed, just endorsed Mop Up Michigan.
He did.
As well as Invest in My Kids.
He did.
And the reason that people are looking at Mop Up Michigan, the target for this is DTE and Consumers Energy. The fact that these entities that are regulated by the state are allowed to make unlimited contributions to candidates who are regulating them. And there is a clear conflict of interest. Yeah. There needs to be some clarity that if you regulate me, I cannot pay you. That feels like a basic ethical expectation that is not in place in our state. And so Mop Up Michigan is saying that, and until we get to Mop Up Michigan, we have an attorney general. Now, I don't agree with everything Dana Nessel does. There's some things and decisions she's made, especially around some of the students protesting the genocide, that I just disagree with. But I agree with her scrutiny of the DTE rate hike request.
And she's certainly been a champion of taking on corporate greed and holding corporations accountable.
Yeah. And that so this is an important fight. And connected to that, but not the same thing, is that
it's going to be a lot higher if they go through with this.
The city wants, DTE is also trying to open up a data center with OpenAI and in Saline, Michigan. The people in Saline, Michigan don't necessarily want this data center. In fact, some of they voted it down, but it feels as though it's going to happen anyway, in part because it brings so much money with it. It would just greatly increase the tax base in Saline. But I think that there's some other concerns that people have about these data centers. The environmental impact of data centers, which use an extraordinary amount of water. Now, DTE is saying, no, we have new technology. We won't be using all that water. And then the heavy use of electricity. And so, you need the water to cool because the computers get so hot and they consume so much electricity, these data centers.
Yeah, DTE completely rejects this also. I mean, it is important to note that every piece of evidence, it's important to note that when you go and you pay your bill, they're literally telling you, no, you're not actually, no. This is justified because of reason that you will never see or feel.
Yeah, there's data on Michigan's energy production that shows that it's dirtier than most other states.
And DTE rejects it.
And DTE rejects that. Of course, I would reject it too. There was a time when tobacco manufacturers denied that smoking caused cancer. Of course, they reject it. But I think the question is not what do they say, what do the facts say, and what has happened in other places. Data centers, in addition to everything we talked about, one of the challenges with data centers is that they use up so much energy, and they get these agreements with the energy companies to cap their bills. And the excess bill is passed on to the rest of us. And so you have, on the east side of Detroit, an outdated grid that's unreliable and energy that costs more than most states. And now you have a data center that is going to draw some of this electricity. Yeah. The infrastructure is going to be invested in them. And the price is likely to go up. Even if the price per unit doesn't go up, somebody's going to have to pay the bill.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about these Tennessee rural communities that say that the water pressure in their faucets, in their showers, is being impacted by the amount of water it takes, their energy bills are increased, and the design choice, the layout, and the amount of space that the actual data centers themselves take up are just a nuisance in their backyards. And, a lot of these folks, of course, are living in rural communities on purpose, living in sort of with, the environment in mind. We think about our rural neighbors across Michigan, but I think in a certain way, in a certain connotation, one connotation we forget is that a lot of these folks really care about the environment and the Great Lakes, no matter what else they think in their minds. They use the environment as a reason to block, affordable housing in their neighborhoods. Think about those same people when you say, okay, no affordable housing, but we'll put a data center. They're saying no also to that. And it's an interesting horseshoe of sort of right-wing folks who, want their communities to stay as they have been inherited, for generations. Open fields and farming and agricultural communities are transformed into part of OpenAI's Stargate project to deploy $500 billion in American AI infrastructure over the next 10 years or whatever. We're making such a big bet on this industry.
And it's not necessarily reliable. I think people are saying that there's a limit to how many data centers we'll actually need. A lot of them are talked about but not built. Michigan actually doesn't have the most data centers in our region. Illinois and Ohio are 4th and 5th in the number of data centers in our region. Michigan does have over 50 data centers, however, and I don't think that most people know that data centers are not new to our community. There's a reason why data centers are coming to Great Lakes states, and that's because of the access to water, and also because of relatively cool temperatures in comparison to many other places. But we already have so many threats to groundwater in our state. Every single Great Lakes state is struggling with groundwater in parts of the state. If we deplete our groundwater, you don't replace it. So I think that we also have to be very concerned about protecting our water source, and we don't always do that.
Yeah, DTE would completely reject that.
Of course. What would they say? What?
I don't know. I mean, they just say that, don't. Nope. They assure you that. I don't know if they actually explain it. I am saying this to say I think that it is a very suspicious and frankly weak justifications for a lot of their decision making right now. Related companies is another component to this story.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the governor's race between Jocelyn Benson, Garland Gilchrist, Chris Swanson, Mike Duggan, John James, Eric Nesbitt, Tom Leonard, Anthony Hudson. We should shout out to the racist Republican that sort of capitulated and said, you know what? I guess you were right. Dearborn isn't Sharia law here, and it's okay. We don't need to even talk about Dearborn today, but related companies, of course, the developer of this data center with OpenAI has a connection to Jocelyn Benson.
Yes.
As her husband, Ryan Friedrichs, is the vice president of related companies.
He is. And the president is Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross of Ross Business Schools. He is a big developer, a big name in our state, very powerful.
And she has assured her supporters who, a lot of these folks are progressive Democrats that also say, get the hell out of here with your data center. Her husband, Ryan Friedrichs, this is according to Ben Solis of Michigan Advance, has said that he will recuse himself from state work on the data center if she is elected governor.
What good would that do? I don't really understand.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you work for a company and somebody recuses themselves from certain aspects of that company, but that company is benefiting from that relationship, you can't. There's certain conflicts that you simply cannot undo because they exist. And so Ryan Friedrichs is not an unknown name in Detroit, though.
No, because of course, we know him from the Duggan years. Yeah. Benson and Duggan, who politicos in Lansing say Benson is the front runner to win the Democratic nomination for governor. If she were to do that over Chris Swanson and Garland Gilchrist, she would face the Republican candidate and an independent Mike Duggan. Ryan worked for Mike Duggan.
Until
what?
Until Make Your Date.
Right.
There's a conflict in Make Your Date and this belief that there was steering of money from other infant mortality prevention projects to Mike Duggan's girlfriend, now his wife. At the time it was his girlfriend, now it's his wife. And so he stepped down from that. Now he's working with Stephen Ross. And I think it's testimony, or it kind of illustrates how big money operates in our state, right? Yeah. Because here you have possibly, I think the most ironic battle would be if you had Mike Cox running against Mike Duggan
and Benson.
And then Benson, because they all have political ties, even though they would be representing different partisan groups, right? Duggan is like, well, I'm nonpartisan. I just happen to lean right, and maybe I'm left on some issues. Benson would be representing the Democratic Party and Cox the Republican Party, but Duggan and Cox got started in McNamara's office. They are his proteges. And Ryan Friedrichs is also part of Duggan's administration and Benson's husband. So, it's interesting. And I think to some extent, that is why some people become cynical or check out of politics, because there's 2 degrees of separation between all of these folks. And there's not a sense in any of these circles that anybody is representing the people.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about DTE and why we keep getting our bills increased every single year, well, there is a regulator body tasked with holding these companies accountable on behalf of residents, members of the Michigan Public. It's called the Michigan Public
Service
Commission. And it just got a new member. This person was a former advisor to the governor, former chief of staff to Joe Tate, who has been criticized heavily by his opponents for taking corporate cash from utility companies. Myers, while she was, Shaquila Myers is who I'm talking about, while she was chief of staff to Joe Tate, Tate blocked multiple packages that would have dealt with holding some of these energy companies accountable, environmental policies that were opposed by Consumers Energy and DTE. She was appointed by the governor after Governor Whitmer declined to reappoint a former member of the body who was, reportedly championed by advocates.
Right. So
who said that she was a champion for consumers. She is now the state's chief climate officer within Eagle.
Right.
And so no explanation was given. And of course, the state Senate, who has the ability to hold hearings on Whitmer's appointments, they have not done that. There was a Traverse City Democrat, Betsy Kofia, who wrote to Winnie Brinks asking her to do just this, saying that they should hold an advice and consent hearing into Whitmer's appointment of Shaquila Myers. That did not happen.
Yeah.
But DTE, they sell gas to over 1 million people across the state. I think is it DTE or Consumers that has more customers? I'm not sure.
I think DTE does, but I'm not sure either. I know that Consumers has a larger geography, but I think there's more concentrated people in the DTE. And however we define that.
Yeah, wherever
it's even
DTE
bigger.
is, yeah.
But a couple of things to know. One, this is a priority of the Whitmer administration as well. She's trying to bring jobs to the state, and this looks like jobs and economic investment, and governors get judged on, do you bring jobs and economic investment? And so this would be a win for the governor in that respect.
The data center, yeah.
The data center would be.
I mean, she's framing it as, and Joe Tate used this language as well, the largest investment in the history of the state.
Right. And so when you have the pressure on politicians to deliver economic wins often come at the expense of environmental justice. The interesting thing also about this is it's going in a community that is not necessarily seen as a most vulnerable community to economic injustice. Saline, Michigan is not a community that is, I don't believe it's predominantly Black. I don't believe it's low income.
No.
And yet this is a community it's going into. And so I think two things, the way we frame our conversations around environment have to be bigger than just ethnicity and income. Because, sometimes they're looking for open land. And if people are concerned about the data center and the impact of the data center on the environment, then we need to, as a state, come together a little bit more effectively. There are politicians running for office who are opposed to all of this. For example, we have Garland Gilchrist, who is increasingly aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America and the Working Families Party. You have...
Did you see his video with Jasmine Crockett?
Yeah.
That made waves.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. What did you think of that?
He's trying to make a name for himself. I think that what he really needs to do is be more clear. And he came on our show and he was on our podcast. He's brilliant and he needs to show people what his thoughts are. There's no time like now. I understand he is still lieutenant governor, and as lieutenant governor, there's only so many things he can say. I think it's going to be really hard for him to run effectively as lieutenant governor. It might make sense for him to step down from that post that he can speak freely, but that's just me. But he is aligning himself, and he is saying some things, and he is supporting some things that you would not expect coming out of the governor's office right now. The other person, of course, is Abdul El Sayed, who's been getting a lot of endorsements. He's been really making waves, and he is a medical doctor. He's written books on Medicare for all. He's a professor. He's a former head of a health department. And so if he is a senator representing our state, you can believe that he will be speaking out on some of these environmental justice causes. So I think that there's this move in our state where people are starting to think about things beyond counting jobs or counting economic investment and really looking at, does this economic investment raise the income and viability of average Michiganders? I think that we are one of the poorest states. We have one of the lowest median incomes in the nation based on something that I read today. Did you see that?
I mean, think about all of the lawmakers who have, been sitting in these seats telling you that they represent some of the poorest areas of the country. And they've been in these seats for years while also saying, I've brought however many X amount of dollars back to my district. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, what's happening?
Yeah.
Where's that money going? I think folks, especially when you talk about voter turnout, I think Orlando Bailey on Local 4 in the clip that you saw, I think kind of go viral on my Instagram, really point out, if people don't feel anything for their vote, if you say, vote, and then, okay, what did I get for that? Mm-hmm. And if you ask them to do it again and again and again, they're going to go insane.
Well, I think that, I'm so proud of Orlando. He just did win our Truth to Power Award at the Eastside Extravaganza. Well-deserved, because when he gets out there and he talks on TV news, he says things that a lot of us wish would be said more often.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you're just listening to people bash people for not voting without really doing a critical analysis of why democracy has become so unpopular in so many places, because so many people don't believe it works. We're seeing changes. We're seeing younger generations begin to take control of a lot of our political decision-making, and I hope it continues, because younger adults are not our future, they're our now. And if we really want to make this state, this city, this nation what it needs to be, we're going to need people who are aware of the problems as they exist today and are willing to fight them and make changes. Because if you keep on doing the same old thing, you're going to keep on destroying our climate. You're going to keep on widening the income gap, and things won't get better anytime soon.
Yeah, you're going to keep on, sort of trouncing on democracy. And that's sort of what critics of this data center say is happening in Saline Township. The township rejected the proposal. The Oracle and Related and OpenAI.
Yeah.
They sued. The developer sued the township And think about this Saline Township, Michigan, right? Washtenaw County versus Oracle, OpenAI, and related. Yeah. What do you think is going to be the outcome of that lawsuit, right? And so they settled to proceed.
Yeah. They
said, to hell with your township board vote. We're just going to sue you.
And it happens all over the nation, and we're not even aware of that. And we've tried to address it through a community benefits process in Detroit that is not very effective. But there's got to be a way that people have control over the uses of the environments that surround them. I wish we'll talk about more on this later. We're going to have to cut this short. But thank you so much for listening to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. This has been a good conversation, Sam.
Yeah, we should talk more about the data center stuff because, again, the DTE.
Maybe we can bring on a guest who can help explicate the issue. I'm even willing to let DTE sit across that guest. Maybe that would be a great conversation.
You know, they love to deploy folks in our community to represent them.
They do, and I have friends. I have friends who work for DTE.
Sure.
I don't dislike the people. I just think that we have to look at the corporate behavior, and I try to separate one from the other because we all have to have a job somewhere, right? Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. And, of course, support Black independent reporting on Detroit1million.com because good journalism costs.
Thank you.